Joining us now, the President and CEO of Freedom Works, Adam Brandon. Adam, great to have you back.
Hey, thanks very much for having me, and I so appreciate all the work you're doing to fight to open this country back up. You're absolutely right. This is the biggest tragedy, self-inflicted tragedy possibly in American history.
How do we stop it?
Well, you do what you're doing, what I think a lot of your listeners are doing. I actually think the only reason the economy is opening are the men and women, people who listen to your program. They got out and waved those American flags and said that they're prepared to start living with Corona and open this economy up. And I believe that we have polling that shows now this is becoming a 50-50 issue, and it's going to soon become a 60-40 issue where Americans, they want to see their economies opened again. I mean, this is people were killing off Main Street. People don't realize when this is over and you go to walk down Main Street to go to that coffee shop, go to that restaurant, it might be gone.
They're all going out of business, Adam, because every day this goes on, more and more businesses are folding. I know personally, I live in Chesapeake. I came home this weekend. I have a friend of mine. He owns 6 IHOP franchises around the South Side area, and he's worked on these for 3 decades. He filed bankruptcy on Friday. He can't pay these rents. He can't pay anything. So he just files bankruptcy.
I have a personal friend who was sober for over 400 days who the pressure got to him because he was fearful of losing his job. And he had a breakdown a few days ago. And so when I start hearing Fauci talking about we need to do this to avoid unnecessary death, he was saying this morning, I'm thinking to myself, man, in my own friends and family, I'm seeing this take on probably a multi-decade impact on people's health. I think that the long-term health effects from the ensuing economic crisis are going to be worse than the corona deaths eventually. So we've got to get this economy back open. We can do it safely. We can do it responsibly, but we need to get it off its back. Otherwise, we are looking at potentially another a reboot of the 1930s. And the problem is the other political party, the Democratic Party, they're completely fine with that. Nancy Pelosi's out talking about she wants a Rooseveltian response. Well, we all know how that's going to look. You mentioned some of the spending. Every single dream, left-wing dream, they're looking like, man, oh man, we could force that down the president right now and then set up for electoral victory in the fall and keep going. So it is amazing. Just a few months ago, we were in the catbird seat, and now we got, 6 months or so to really dig ourselves back out of it.
Can we do that, Brandon?
We have no choice. We really have no choice. And my feeling is now that some of these states are starting to open, once people see, yes, that the COVID cases will go up, but they're going to go up no matter what. The goal, remember at the beginning of all this, that our health officials said was keep the cases below a certain level, flatten the curve so we don't overwhelm the hospitals. Okay, we did all of that. But if like the Illinois governor is talking about, we need to stay inside until a vaccine. Well, what if a vaccine is found in 5 years? We're not going to open up Illinois and Chicago for 5 years. I mean, this is starting to get a little of insanity. Like we're already starting to hear people talk about not going back to school in the fall. Well, if you don't go back to school in the fall, why even go back to school at all? Are we going to miss an entire year of education and what that means in the long run? I mean, we're crossing over from what is responsible and prudent to what is absolutely insanity.
Okay, but Adam, what is driving the insanity in your judgment? You're right. I mean, you don't go back to school in the fall. It's almost unconscionable. These kids are falling behind. Not everybody is going to a private school for $25,000. All right, there's a lot of kids in failing public schools as it is. They don't have broadband. They don't have the discipline. They just don't have a lot. And so they're continuing to fall behind. What comprehension could there be not to have school in the fall?
Well, let's also look at the problem. Coronavirus, when you start breaking down the numbers, overwhelmingly is affecting certain populations. We know who those populations are. We know about our assisted living facilities and our nursing homes are right in the crosshairs of this disease. So therefore, there is where we should be putting our focus. But a bunch of 18-year-olds in a high school, a bunch of 30-year-old millennials, those 30-year-old millennials should be out to work. Now, I think the root cause of this is that we so successfully, the media has scared our citizens. We were looking at polls, and this was as of Monday, so that would have been yesterday. 62% of Americans are scared to leave their house. I mean, that is absurd. Like, we know who is the most at risk. If you're a 30-year-old who works, you're not at high risk of contracting the most lethal form of this disease. So we should be protecting the most vulnerable, but also understanding what is the true fear. And once you do that, once you start looking at that, then you can start opening up schools again. And these are the very people that we need to get out, get back to school. And they also, as they get this disease, they start building up herd immunity. I hate to think about this, but in 4 or 5 years, we're going to look back and be like, gee, Sweden probably had the correct response. Sweden of all places, not the United States.
Sweden. They got it figured out. Like they said, they were going to take a hit. They were going to have a lot of cases and a lot of people in hospitals, but they were going to not overwhelm their system. They were going to get out of it. And they've done nothing. I mean, Sweden is, if you look at their numbers, Adam, Brandon, they're right in the middle of every other country, and they have done nothing. I mean, you talk about nothing. Nothing is closed. Schools aren't closed. They're still playing soccer. They're still going to events. They're still having concerts. Nothing has changed at all, and they're in the same position. Georgia opened 2 weeks ago, Adam, Brandon. I went there for the opening. I was there for a week, 7 days, Monday to Friday. I was in Atlanta. I had a bunch of people on my show. So after 2 weeks of Georgia being open, right, hospitalizations are down. So when I was there, I had people telling me, you know what, there's going to be body bags and cul-de-sacs. Hospitalizations are down in Georgia. I mean, it doesn't matter what the evidence is, Brandon. It doesn't matter what the science or the numbers say. I'm convinced now that the left and the Democrats are leveraging this to do two things. One, justify a mail-in ballot, vote by mail, change the way we elect people because they can manipulate it, cheat, and scheme and do fraud, and elect Joe Biden. I have no doubt in my mind that the vaccine here is Joe Biden. He wins. Miraculously, the next day they'll all have all new models that popped up that said everything is fine, go out and play.
I can almost guarantee that what you just said about Joe Biden, but when I talk to FreedomWorks supporters and all, I tell people my number one fear right now is that mail-in voting becomes vote by email, which becomes direct democracy. And once you start pairing up direct democracy with universal basic income, we get to that moment that Benjamin Franklin, 250 years, warned us about: a republic if you can keep it. The minute you have this direct vote, direct democracy, all our political system becomes is who's going to give me more free crap. And that is every election. It's no longer between the Republicans and the Democrats. It's between people who are going to say, we're going to give you $10,000 a month, and someone who's going to say, I'm going to give you $12,000 a month. And it reminds me of that old Soviet joke. They pretend to work, we pretend to pay. And so, people would be getting all this free cash, but with the currency and the economy wrecked, what are you really getting besides useless bits of paper? I mean, we're starting to talk about scenarios that are more common in Venezuela and Zimbabwe than we are the United States. And that is what is at stake, not in the coming years, but in the coming weeks and months. And that is why we have to work our tails off to get ready for this fall. To first of all, get our economy open. Second, we've got to stop all the ludicrous bills that Nancy Pelosi wants to pass. And then third, we got elections to win.
You're on the John Fredericks Radio Network. We're with Adam Brandon. He is President and CEO of FreedomWorks. You go to freedomworks.com. Adam, when I get back, I want to talk about this new bailout for these states, which is the new piggy bank, basically, to mask 30 and 40 years of financial mismanagement. And now they want, the taxpayer in Montana to bail them out in Illinois or whatever. And what's amazing to me is the governors that close their states down to get no income are the ones that are screaming to get bailed out, like Larry Hogan, who is a complete clown in Maryland. And by the way, he said maybe, Adam, if you're nice to him and you send him a box of chocolates and flowers, maybe, just maybe, he'll think about a date where perhaps you can open up your business. Maybe. He'll think about it. All these states now have their hand in the taxpayer cookie jar, and Pelosi basically saying, look, I'm not going to do anything if we don't give more money to these cities and states. What say you?
Back and what caused this problem in the first place, and this was you'd have states like Illinois that had Democrat on Democrat power, and so what would they do? Well, the elections became, I'm going to give you more free things. I'm going to give you more on your pensions without any idea of what the reality of the situation was, and without any concern of the taxpayer. So every election became more gimmies. And so what you start to have is you have a state set up there where the pension system, the promises that have been made to employees are nowhere near the state's ability to pay for it. So this is a crisis that has been in the works for decades. This is not a new crisis where coronavirus popped up and caused this problem. But because of coronavirus, it's a great excuse to say, hey, federal government, could you come in and pour tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars into these state pension systems so we could prop up these promises that were made to state unions by Democratic politicians over the last several years. It's ludicrous to think that you have states that are very well run, very well managed, and they're going to have to send their taxpayer dollars to these bankrupt states to bail them out. And this has nothing to do with the coronavirus crisis and pandemic. The Americans understand when you have a health emergency, the federal government may need to jump in and take care of some things here and there, but that has to do with the actual virus. And what you're talking about, these state bailouts, is 20, 30 years plus of bad management that is good, and they're going to use this bug as an excuse to just dump hundreds of billions of dollars to bail out the unions.
How do we stop it?
Well, the first thing we have to stop, and I was so pleased to see this the other day when Larry Kudlow, I believe it was on Friday, came out and said that the White House has paused negotiations with the House. You know, I think it's very important right now for everyone to get on their phones, to be calling their senator, to be calling their congressman and let them know that you oppose these state bailouts, need to oppose any new spending. I think it's time to pump the brakes. We got several $1 trillion working through the pipeline as it is from the last rounds. What I'm think we should be more focused on is opening up the economy. You don't need to do the stimulus and the bailouts if the economy is functioning. Go back to March. We had one of the best economies in American history. That was, 8 weeks ago that we were talking about the Federal Reserve reevaluating their first quarter growth rates to over 3%, getting back to close to 3.5%, and now we're staring at a Great Depression. Come on. It is time to reopen the economy, and a lot of these other bailouts and other problems, they just disappear once the economy is moving again.
Well, how do we get it moving? How do we get to the point where we can overcome this fear and apprehension and get not only the economy open, Brandon, but then get consumer demand up? Because like you said, polls are showing, 62% of people don't want to go out.
Well, so I think what you start to see, I think what this is going to be a slow process, but thank God you've got people like Kim Reynolds, governor in Iowa, and Brian Kemp down in Georgia, by putting, and they're not just saying, hey, party's on, everyone back in the pool. What they're doing is like, here are the responsible guidelines that you need to be able to go back to work. Here's what you can do to start going and reopening your restaurant. So they're watching the kid situation very, very carefully, but they're also saying, hey, if you're not at least in these high-risk areas, why don't you get out there again? And by doing that, I think they're going to start showing confidence. You mentioned that you were just down in Georgia. Well, once people start moving around and you see some semblance of life reemerging, I think what you'll start to see is more and more people will have the courage to get out. You got to start somewhere, and I applaud those governors for starting to move the wheel again. And it may take weeks and months, but at least they've got it moving. And I think it's key. The one thing is people just have to have confidence. And I think when they see that people are leaving their homes and they're not dropping dead of the plague in the street, it's going to be that's going to be a very powerful thing, and you're going to have data to show that I mean, look, we're going to see what's happening in Europe. Europe is starting to reopen, and it's going to be something where some areas are going to be you have some problems, but most areas are going to be able to safely get back to work.
Adam, let me just ask you one more question. We're almost out of time here. Last time you were on, I think it was you said your mother is in Ohio, right?
Yes, that's right. My mother and dad, they're in lockdown in Ohio.
You said we're in Ohio, and your mom went to her window, and she
Yep.
saw a little girl on a scooter, 5 years old, and she started to cry. Does she hold that same position today?
Yes, she does. But that's because she's only getting the media, and she's not. And actually, now that you say that, I think I'm getting the general sense of on Mother's Day, she drove to my brother's house and sat in the parking or in my brother's garage and waved to everyone in the family. Because she's, I think, getting to the point where even though she's still terrified, she misses her family. She misses her friends. And that's starting to become more of a weighing on her heart than the fears of the disease. But it's also, when she starts hearing about this stuff opening up, when she sees that people are not, that little girl taking the scooter is not going to fall over and die, that's going to give her confidence to support the economy getting back open again. But again, I just worry the media, these poor folks are turning the media on every day. All they're hearing about is how horrific everything is without actually looking at the facts.
Well, and it's you're right. I mean, I've often thought about the conversation you had with me, getting the feeling that your mom actually thought that little girl was putting herself at risk. But right. I turned on, I don't even know what day it was. It was yesterday at some point. I'm flipping the channels, and I guess Brett Baer and Fox News is there. Maybe it was Friday. I don't remember. The days are running together now. But they got some doctor on there telling about, well, there's inflammation now. We know it attacks the lungs, but, now we think maybe it attacks your arteries, and there might be an inflammation, which could lead to this, which could lead to that, which down the road could lead to this, which in 20 years, your feet can fall off. I mean, it was just, it was like, this is all you get now on TV is these doctors telling you every possible thing that could happen over a 20-year period. And so it's frightening people. And I'm looking at this saying to myself, what country do I live in? This is absurd.
On my desk right now is yesterday's a paper copy of the Wall Street Journal. On the front page, quote unquote, ventilator use scaled back.
Well,
remember when all the rage was,
oh my God,
President Trump should be put in prison because we don't have enough ventilators in our hospitals. And now we did all of that work to get all these ventilators, and they're not even used as an effective treatment. Some cases need them, but the amount of overreach and overreaction and over-panic
right.
and misunderstanding, for what? And the trade-off is the one thing that is for certain, we're killing our economy and killing our future.
It's incredible, Adam. And what's going to happen is the numbers and the science, every day is becoming more indisputable. Average age of people that are dying are 75. That's the average age in the United States. I mean, I'm not, trivializing it, but the average age is 75. So think
right.
about what you need to get to an average. That means if somebody 35 dies, you need like 8 people over 87 to die. I mean, so, and then we don't even know if these deaths are really COVID related because every hospital gets $13,000 if the person comes
right.
in and they put COVID. So they have a tremendous financial incentive. So there could be other underlying conditions that are never recorded. Last year in Virginia, 6 months, we had 1,813 people died of the flu. October to April, 2018 to 2019. You know how many people in Virginia have died of the flu from October through April 2019 to 2020? Zero. It's amazing.
Zero.
Nobody dies of the flu now. They all die of
right,
COVID-19.
Right.
Now, and as things were getting better in New York, and there was pressure on Cuomo and de Blasio to open up the state, Cuomo gets on TV on Friday and says a 5-year-old died with potentially COVID-related complications. So the object is, let's now petrify every parent COVID-related. They have no scientific evidence that I could see. I read four 4 articles on his statement. But this is what they're going to do. They're going to fearmonger so they get a mail-in ballot. And then to what you said earlier, mail-in becomes email, which becomes how much money are we going to give away? That's it. Power. Unbelievable.
Well, and I saw a document from New York. This is a few months old, and it was from Cuomo's office, and it said that it was to nursing homes, and they said if you have to treat COVID patients, like you can't deny COVID patients and remove them from your facility. And if you look at most of the deaths in New York, like you're saying, we all know the ages. By law, they're forcing people with COVID to be staying in these nursing homes, which is driving up the body count. So right there, the governor is on such a moral high horse all the time. His order, who knows how many thousands of people died because they were keeping people with COVID in the nursing homes. I mean, it's just insanity that he could be now this health expert lecturer on how we fight this in the United States.
Adam Brandon, I really want to thank you for being with us.